For those of you who are not familiar with the partnership, it is a nonprofit organization working to ensure that we have a better government, stronger democracy, and to create opportunities to develop policy and to invest in leadership skills and talents of our federal workforce. We convene conversations such as this to help support our federal leaders and our workforce overall. We know that many of you have been and continue to be challenged to manage your own emotions as you go through the changes that we are experiencing at this time. Many of these are unexpected and quite different from prior experiences you may have had. At the same time, you continue your very important work for federal agencies, supporting your teams and staff as well, you navigate the same environment. We also know, and please do keep in mind, that what you do matters. It really does. And that you care deeply about public service and about the well-being of those who are your associates and direct reports and companions. Okay, and the critical missions of your organizations. You impact the country and the globe. Over the last few weeks, we've been hosting Explainer series to help federal employees engage and learn, understand what rights they have, how various processes that we're now being introduced to, how they work, what they're supposed to be like, and so on. And to help you become aware of the emotional and sometimes physical charge that the changes are bringing to you. This evening, we're kicking off our civil service support series. We have the informational one, and now we have the support series. This is a partner suite of programming to the Explainer series intended to offer the most holistic support for public servants that we hold in the highest regard. So again, thank you for your service. I will now share a few quick housekeeping details for the evening's process. Okay? Throughout the webinar, we will answer questions that you submitted when you registered. You can also submit a question anonymously through the Q&A function on the screen, and we will work to get through some of those as well. We will not be able to answer every question tonight, but remember that there will be future civil service support sessions, and so we may use some of your questions as the basis of the topics that we will cover in the future. They'll be extremely helpful to have. Now, we will be posting all support and explainer conversations, video conversations on our resource site for the partnership. So if you need to step out or your best friend was not able to join you this evening, you will still have access to the content, okay? Finally, while this discussion is geared towards current federal leaders and employees and supervisors, it is an open forum. And we may have folks joining us from other outside communities, such as good government groups, the media, and the private sector. We welcome you here, but wanted to let you know that we will not be going into how these issues may impact those organizations. This is strictly for our federal family. Okay. Before we start, if folks are comfortable, we wanted to offer you the opportunity to enter a word through the link that will be appearing, a word to describe how you are feeling, anything related to the experience that you're having now, whatever that may be. We will be collecting these and getting a sense of the trends and the patterns that may help you understand that others are sharing the same feelings that you are expressing. Today, we have brought together experienced leaders who can offer some tools and some strategies for navigating through these times that we're in, and specifically concentrating on the concept of resiliency, because that is an essential aspect of what we need to have to succeed at this time. Okay. So I'm going to pass it over to the faculty so they may introduce themselves, and I'm going to start with Laura and Evan.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. It's such a pleasure and privilege to be here with you. I'm Laura Berland. I'm the founder and executive director of the nonprofit Center for Compassionate Leadership. We support and train a community of leaders who are passionate about creating systems and organizations where safety, connection, and belonging are at their core. And we come together to inspire and motivate each other to stay this course, which is hard, but really to bring about change for good.
Yes.
And I'm Evan Harrel. I'm the Chief Operating Officer and co-founder at the Center for Compassionate Leadership. We work to advance principles of leadership that are based on compassion, and we use evidence-based science to do that. And what the science tells us is that leaders who lead with compassion have workforces who thrive more, who have greater sense of well-being, and are more productive and more creative.
Okay. Jane, please.
Thanks, Kelly. Hi, I'm Jane Datta. I am the former Chico of NASA. I retired in 2023. I was at the agency for about 16 years, but I've had over 30 years in the HR field. Since retiring, I have maintained some professional activities and some connection to government organizations. So I am seeing the current issues both from multiple perspectives, but I'm hoping that I can draw from my experience as the Chico in particular to share with you some of my thoughts on, how to manage in this environment.
Yes, thank you. Thank you and welcome. And before I forget, you may be hearing from my colleague Georgia, who is helping us manage the questions and the behind the scenes activities. So let's get to the meat of the matter here, questions to all. We're having the conversation because we know how much federal leaders are facing as they navigate their day-to-day responsibilities, professional and personal. And how would you define resilience in the context of what we are experiencing at this moment? What does that look like for you? And we can start with Lauren and Evan.
Okay. So we believe resilience is the ability to recover from adversity and come out on the other side stronger than before. For federal leaders, what does this look like? It looks like the ability to recognize the reality of this present moment, including all the emotions, all the feelings that you're experiencing, and cultivating a group of positive skill sets that's going to help navigate through the current challenges and emerge stronger.
Thank you. That's really, really helpful, framing it in this way. Thank you. Okay. Laura, did you want to add to that or no? Okay. Jane, please, from your perspective.
So from my perspective, similar to what Evan just shared, but to me, resilience is about retaining yourself intact in times of struggle. And when I say intact, what I mean is your beliefs, your health, the things in your life that provide happiness and security and energy to you. So this idea of holding yourself intact, I think is really important because it's so easy to just let things, erode your sense of self, your health, and those sorts of things. Right now, for federal leaders, you're doing this on two levels. You are doing this for yourself and your families, but you are also doing this for the people who work for you. And so you have that kind of double responsibility, which means that that's going to take a lot out of you. So I think paying attention to being intact, what are the levers that you can push and pull to reduce the stress, to keep focus, those sorts of things. And I hope we can cover some of those items in our conversation tonight. But again, staying intact, I think, is what resilience is about.
Jane, given your history with the breadth of experience that you've had, and so on, can you share with us any strategies that you may have that you find effective in supporting our office teams, our leaders at times of change and challenge?
Sure. I'd be happy to. Thanks, Feli. So let me share that I became the Chico at NASA in January of 2020, a date of some significance. And COVID came, the public health emergency began a couple months later. And so I kind of had a front row seat and participated, of course, in addressing that. So in thinking about the differences and similarities between that experience and the one that we're in now, what I'd say is, first of all, COVID was hard and we got through it, but I think that in some ways, the scope and scale of what we've got right now is actually bigger. And so I wanted to acknowledge that because I don't want to downplay what it feels like right now for you all. So, but there are some similarities that I would like to share and then maybe draw some of what we did to help ourselves in that time. Some of the similarities were that, first of all the rules of order went because everyone went home. And so all the things that you relied on for your day-to-day operations were kind of like not reliable anymore. So this idea of staying intact was hard because you were dispersed, and all of the mechanisms that you relied on to get work done and interact with each other were put aside. It was also something that evolved over time. And so there was a sense that you would wake up in the morning and something else was happening, right? So there's that feeling of not really being able to get your footing, finding purchase, if you will, on the ground because things kept moving. So knowing that there are some similarities, I also want to say, of course, that it was the pandemic affected personal life as well as professional, right? So we lost people. And they lost their family members or neighbors or members of the community. And so that was really hard. And in the same way, we're watching people around us today lose their jobs, right? Or, struggle with the changes that have come in, or the potential changes to the missions, or what's going to happen with my family. And so there are similarities in scope in that regard. So while this isn't a full sort of solution set, I do look back on our time dealing with the pandemic and realize that there were a couple of things that we did that might be useful now. One was that in terms of taking in stuff that was going on, we had to kind of narrow our focus a little bit. We had to be a little bit more targeted about how we spent our brain energies, right? Because if you keep wide open, hello world, I'm here, then you can get overwhelmed really, really fast. And in the pandemic, we focused a lot, not alone, but as a leadership team on, how it is that we were going to make decisions, how it was that we were going to get things back to some degree of normalcy, et cetera, et cetera. But we did it by really narrowing that focus. At the same time, we were expanding and broadening our network and our sense of community, right? And so this idea that we have to focus, but we have to stay in touch with people. We have to, like an invisible thread that would connect everyone together, because isolation is a terrible thing to experience when you are in a time of great and hard change. It is terrible. And so we knew that, for instance, people might feel isolated. And so we worked with our supervisors and managers to do really simple things like reach out to every employee, just talk to them, find out how they're doing, and take time with your family and figure out how you can do work around them so that you can be there for them, make adjustments that would never have really been considered before. Let's do that so that we can just make sure that we're connected to the people who matter and to each other so we do not feel isolated. So anyway, those are some starting ideas for us.
Thank you. So Evan and Laura, You help people realize self-compassion and expend it to others. What are some of the practices that you find most important for leaders to consider at a time like this?
Yeah, thank you. And Jane, you brought up COVID, which I wasn't expecting to hear about today. And it's the 3rd anniversary of my brother's passing from COVID.
Oh.
And I'm just going to take a moment to compose myself because, this is when self-compassion is needed most, when we're feeling grief, when we're feeling pain, when we're feeling these difficult, heavy emotions. And I want to define it for us because it gets thrown about as a term in a lot of different ways. But really, it's giving yourself the same care and kindness that you would offer a dear friend, right? And it's truly powerful medicine. I never would have gotten through that episode of his passing without it. And I have used it in many other areas of life, of course, probably day to day, and never enough, because it's such good medicine that if it were in a pill, it would be the best-selling medicine anywhere in the world. It's that powerful, and yet it's not easy to do, right? Just to simply treat yourself as well as you would treat a friend. So there are a couple of ideas for putting this into practice in your life. First, to practice self-kindness instead of the self-criticism that, we all have a very strong inner critic. None of us are immune to that. And that inner critic grabs hold of us and takes us and is so harsh. It is never the voice that you would share with anyone other, a friend, anyone. So to really consider when you're facing a setback, to notice that voice and to offer yourself, what would I say to a dear friend? And to turn that lens of care and kindness and attention inward. So powerful, very, very important in creating that sense of self-support and nurturing that we need. Acknowledging that we are part of this larger common humanity, that this is a shared human experience. It's what we all went through in COVID. It's what we're going through now. No one is immune. And as you mentioned, Jane, the possibility of isolation is really so dangerous. So if you're feeling alone, or if you're feeling responsible, or you're carrying such a big burden on your shoulder, remind yourself, and these are 3 really simple words, just like me. Just like me, so many other leaders are facing the same challenges. We're all struggling. And I am not the only one who feels this way. And you'd be surprised on how connecting yourself to this web of common humanity can really lighten your own load. And then thirdly, I would say to cultivate awareness, to bring that level of attention to whatever challenges we're facing non-judgmentally, so we can sort of look at the landscape, but not get overwhelmed by the emotions, right? And a way to do this is to simply take a beat, take a breath, separate yourself with a moment of pause. Again, such a simple thing to do and something we all skip over because we're running so fast. And then try to set healthy boundaries for yourself. I love, Jane, how you said to stay intact. What does that mean? We have to bound ourselves. We have to be really intentional about it. It's so easy because we're in the business of service and care that we give out and out and out. And we truly have to schedule it, protect ourselves, keep the boundaries strong. And that takes a lot of self-compassion. And lastly, ask for help. We all need support. We are leaders. We think other people look for us for support. And so we don't necessarily want to be vulnerable and show that we need and can ask for help. That doesn't weaken us. That shows that we are human too, and people can relate better to us when we understand each other on that level.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
you for sharing.
Yes, building on that, connection and community are central to your work. Absolutely key to your work, okay? Part of our motivation in hosting this particular series is to provide community to our civil servants through a shared experience and help them learn some understanding. Could you say a little bit more about why community is so important and the role that it plays in resiliency?
I'd be happy to. It's a great question. I mean, why is community important? Well, I started by saying that our work is based on science. And what does the science tells us? Science tells us that community is the critical factor for psychological resilience. We need community because it is what allows us to process through what is so hard. It provides emotional support. You can help share with people what you're feeling. And when we're in community with people going through similar things, it's really helpful because it does remind us that we are not alone, that we are sharing. All of us in this room are going through some intense experiences in this moment. And it helps just to remember that we can process through that. And community, people in community can help providing advice and encouragement in that way. But not just emotional support, just practical support. How do I do something? How do I get help? The Explainer series is a tremendous set of tools for practical support. How can we respond? Let's share our knowledge with each other so that we can all benefit from what has worked for other people. And then finally, when we're in community, it helps re-anchor us with our sense of purpose and meaning. Public service is inherently mission-driven. And when we enter into periods of systemic chaos like this, it can be disorienting. It can lead to disillusionment. We can get disconnected from why we really are trying to serve. When we get back in community, we can re-anchor. We can potentially recognize that there are things that we can do to get back to the mission-driven purpose that got us all here and perhaps has been knocked off center.
Absolutely.
And I just want to add one thing. All community is not equal. There's also research around the quality of connections. And I would just tell you that high quality connections are characterized by three things: by vitality, by mutuality, and by positive regard. So surround yourself with people and be the person who uplifts with vital energy. Be the person who reciprocates, because, we can't be listened to if there's not someone to listen, and vice versa. We need to listen so that others can also. And then finally, positive regard. We need to be careful because this is a challenging time and we can get drawn into the drama and the negative drama, but there are always places, and this is not toxic positivity. There are always places where there is some form of hope, where there is some form of potential, and we need to focus on that through positive regard.
To that point, I just a couple of days ago, I received a wonderful message from one of my Excellence in Government classes, and there's roughly 25, 30 people in the class, and this is a class that goes back a few years. And one of the fellows, as we call the participants, sent a note to the entire class, sharing his experiences at the moment, but also saying, understanding that you are all going through some fashion of this. Why don't we use this as an opportunity to learn, to share not only what we're experiencing, what we need, but also what we may offer each other. And it was a beautiful way of framing it. It was a talk about building communities in terms of what we do through the partnership. But it was marvelous to see the responses that have come in from other members and how they are sharing that model with other peers in other parts of organizations. So I think it underscores the importance of community and the ways in which we can creatively help define and inform what happens in those communities. Okay. Jane, I so appreciate your reminding us of that dreadful experience in COVID. And of course, I'm so sorry, Laura, that this coincidentally is such a terrible anniversary for you. But we build on that experience and we move forward as you have. Jane, we know that despite the current environment of challenging changes and all kinds of dynamics and so on, federal leaders have to balance existing work with any incoming requests and priorities and so on. What strategies would you recommend for balancing new priorities with existing longer term, perhaps, activities? What has been your experience that you can share with us?
So I want to start this response with an acknowledgement. And that is that in this particular time, what's happening feels weirdly personal. It's personal to the federal workforce. And so that makes this a little unusual. But it also introduces what I call it cognitive dissonance. I know that has an official definition, and this may not be it, but just bear with me for a second. You're holding two things to be true at the same time, right? One is maybe I'm not needed. Maybe the work that I'm being told that maybe the work that I do isn't important. And then on the other hand, the truth, your truth is that you've been working hard and adding value that you can see all over the place. And so how can those two things operate together? So what I'd invite you to do, and to some degree, we had to do this also back those 3 years ago when we were like, can we do anything at all? Or is this it? Is that to do what Laura and Evan were talking about with, there is hope for starters, but also recognize it as dissonance. Okay, there are two things. They look like they're mutually exclusive. They are both here together. And thus, I have to decide that I'm either just going to be defeated by it or I'm going to move on. And so, and in the moving on, then you can get very much more practical about how it is you deal with the changing workload, the changing landscape of who's going to be here to help get the mission done and who's not, for instance. And so, and the tools and techniques that you use to do that are not dissimilar from any other kind of chaos that gets created, right? So like a big change in mission, or suddenly the budget that your agency was going to get was a lot less than expected. And so things have to be reformulated. And there's always some version of chaos that comes in when those sorts of things happen, especially if they are unexpected. So leverage what you know how to do in times of great stress, and put aside, to the extent that you can, that dissonance that comes from that personalization. I would also like you to do two things. One, I started my comments earlier by saying that, one of the things about the pandemic that we're seeing here is that the proper order of things is sort of didn't seem to appear, so we were getting messages in the middle of night and, and invitations to do X, Y, or Z, and that's not from a source I recognize, and what is this? And so it's the proper order. I do believe that the proper order will come back, but albeit slowly. So what I invite you to do is to look for signals of that proper order. And one of the ways to do that is to know who you trust and want to collaborate with as you do the figuring out of what's most important, what is less important. So this idea of the proper order is incredibly important. Don't go it alone either. So don't do anything alone, and engage your staff. Engage your staff in all aspects of this. So it's amazing to me how much just communicating, even saying to them, I really don't know the answer. is actually helpful to them. It sounds like it wouldn't be, but it can be, because then it's this idea that you have allies and you're in this together. The other thing that I'd invite you to do is to watch out for heroes. What I mean by that is there are people who you might not have expected that emerge in times of great stress. And maybe they will offer some assistance that you never would have expected, or they provide some perspective to you, or they stand up and clarify something that really helps. And so they may not be people that you know directly, although you could, but the idea is that you look out for people who are helping to do the sense making, you're reaching out to others, and you are just leveraging all of your normal techniques, triaging what has most urgent. I mean, that's all the stuff. I don't need to go over that because you know how to do that already. But just in the context of putting things aside and reaching out to those who can give you the kind of perspective and context. A lot of it's context. And believe in your hearts that normal order will start to reemerge. So anyway, my thoughts.
Thank you. To Evan and Laura, we often make the metaphor of change, times of change being either a marathon or a sprint. And at this time, it feels like we are simultaneously in marathon and sprint time. What advice would you have, or what guidance can you offer in terms of how to manage this process?
So the first thing I recommend, I've already mentioned, come back to your purpose. Stay anchored in your purpose. Just remember that your intention may be all that you can offer, but that is very powerful. Even if the system is trying to undermine the work that you are able to do or limit it, just stay focused that you are doing what you are able to do and stay focused on that purpose. Then, and Jane just said this, prioritize, and I'd say prioritize ruthlessly. You have to set boundaries because in the midst of a hurricane, all you can try to do is make sure that the things that you can hold down, you hold down. Ask yourself, what is possible right now? What can I do right now? And then let go of all those things that you cannot do. It's very upsetting, especially when many of the good things that you have been doing, you cannot do anymore. But just ask the question, what can I do? Set boundaries. And that positive question can help draw us towards really focusing on what truly matters and helping us recognize that we still have a sense of agency. The COVID experience is really powerful because this came in, no one knew what to do. It took us a few months to figure it out. Our whole world was disrupted, but most of us had never even been on regular Zoom calls like this. We figured out how to move through. We will figure out how to move through. And so you have to just stay focused that's the marathon part. The sprint part is to stay focused on what you can do, and then you regain that sense of agency. And Jane also said, this is not personal. This isn't personal.
Yeah.
Even if someone tells you, blames you, points their finger at you, that's coming from their emotions, their feelings, their experience. And we can see this playing out on the emotional psychodrama right here on our televisions. This is not personal, and we have to let go of it, even though it is affecting us personally. It is disrupting our life, but so did COVID. And we were able to recognize that COVID wasn't personal either. It was just a virus. And forgive me for saying that, and Laura, especially, please forgive me for saying that today. But we have to recognize that all that's unfolding is because of the outward actions of the actors, not you as the recipients. And then finally, I would just say, try to go through this as a learning experience. Look back on COVID. What did we learn then? We're so goal-oriented that we forget that in each moment, we're getting more data, we're getting more information. And so even in the midst of really hard times, we can learn from what is going on around us if we're willing to stop and say, I wonder why that is that way. I wonder what that means.
Yes. It's excellent and powerful and direct and actionable advice, which is what I so appreciate. Closing up this segment before we turn to address questions that may have come in through the participants. Any further advice that you would give for moving through that sense of being demotivated and personal frustration? You've given us such wonderful wisdom, and I can assure you that many, if not all of us, will be putting that to use, whether it's personally or in terms of our business setting, our communities, etc. But are there any additional comments that you would like to share? And Jane, I'll start with you.
I wanted to amplify what Evan said a moment ago about learning, but also the silver linings, of which there were some from the pandemic for sure. I do think that there will and can and will be some good things that come out of all of this turmoil. And so things might be possible when we get to a more stable place and can realize it, that maybe we would have thought would take us decades to do. And so I really, change is always hard. That's why change management is a whole industry. So it's because it's hard. We humans don't like change very much. So, keeping hold of the belief that you'll get to that sort of a somewhat greater stability and that there will be some good things, and helping the people who come in to the agencies who want to do these things, helping them get to some of those good things is part of the service that you render. Of course, you know that because we've been through presidential transitions many a time. If you've been in the government for more than a decade, the way we have. But I would say that just keep faith in the possibilities. And one last thing, I think that we read a lot these days about disinformation, and it's a real thing in the media, and so what I would encourage you to do is to believe that there is a truth and seek that truth. And so that when you are helping your people and helping your organizations and your missions, that it is still anchored in real truth. And one of the things that was really wonderful about working for a place like NASA is that when they run their programs and missions, they have to seek the truth. They have to know the data, because you can't do your missions unless you do. And so that sort of mindset of seeking the truth can be applied more broadly. And so don't let the craziness in the blogosphere distract you. Just seek the truth and keep yourself intact. That's what I would say.
Thank you. And again, Laura and Evan, any other comments, or as you think about the topics we have touched on, as Georgia's taking a look at the questions to see what they may be to share from the participants, what else you would like to add?
Yes, and it builds right on, again, on what Jane said about keeping yourself intact. I thought it might be helpful to offer a practice. We have a practice called SOAR, S-O-A-R, for resilience. And like any practice, and I always preface the playing with practice as play, as an experiment, as something you try on, as something you play with and see how it feels and see how it fits. There's no right or wrong way to do any of this, but try it and see if it's helpful. Sometimes these simple little things can make a
Yes.
huge difference, but we're afraid to check in and do it wrong, but there is no wrong. So SOAR for resilience, S for slowing down, O for openness, A for allowing, and R for remembering. We start with slowing down because the noise, because the chaos, the disinformation, the fear, the uncertainty, it's pulled us away, it's grabbed our limbic brain, and we need to interrupt the pattern. So we start by slowing down. And you can do that very simply. Again, feel your feet on the floor, take a breath, touch your body. There's so many beautiful ways just to take it down a notch. But you need the intention and to draw your attention inward. And everything we talk about in leadership, the possibility to really bring compassion really starts from the inside out. So slow it down, interrupt the pattern, open up, because when we're encased in this fear, anxiety, and doubt, our bodies contract, our nervous system contracts, we physically contract. So sometimes you actually have to like, woof, physically open up, bring your arms out, open your heart, remember to let your nervous system feel those signals and relax. A is for allow, to look at the landscape and really feel the feelings, acknowledge what's happening, be present to what is, because we do have to turn towards what is happening. We can't stuff it away, otherwise it multiplies and makes more trouble. But this is another way, when your nervous system is open and flexible, you really have the capacity, and it's working in the prefrontal cortex of your brain to allow you to connect and interact with other people and to process information and use your executive decision-making. Last, remember who you truly are, your purpose, your mission, your presence. Remember that we're all precious human beings worthy of dignity and respect and love, because we simply are part of this common humanity. And we're not our job. We're not the crisis at hand. It's not our fault. And the pain and the adversity that is in front of us right now is not permanent. So we always have that choice. We can use our capacity to move in a direction. And the thing about moving forward is it can be very teeny. Today, I made it through today. Today, I did one small thing. We're not going to fix or change ourselves or the world all at once, but really relish and honor the small moves that come, and remember the power of self-compassion in every moment to support yourself and to offer yourself, as we started, with that same sense of kindness and care that you would offer to any dear friend. It is truly the medicine we all need.
Excellent. Well, I think SOAR is something that we will all remember and think of in a completely different way. So thank you for that framing. It's just superb. Georgia, questions?
Thank you all so much. Before we move over into questions from the group, and we got some great ones submitted through the Q&A function, feel free to keep throwing those in there. I wanted to just pause for a minute to get your input on future sessions. So we always want to make sure that we're doing our best to meet the current moment. And we've already received a lot of great ideas that have helped build out this session and our explainer sessions, but we want to take time to have you, if you're open to it, anonymously answer 3 questions. So my colleague will drop a link in the chat. The first 2 are about your experience tonight, just to make sure that we're giving all of you what's really helpful and that you can take this with you. And then the third question will be your input for future sessions. So if you have anything that you might want to add, feel free to drop that into the chat. I think that just popped up for everybody. So while you are doing that, I'm going to move on to some of the questions that came through the Q&A. And for our panelists, just feel free to jump on the mic. And Feli, you too. I know you have a lot of great federal experience that you can share as well. So the first one is, could you share some advice on how to operate in the unknown, given that this moment comes with a lot of unknowns from country, agency, programs, careers, you know, kind of runs the gamut. Any advice there?
Go ahead, Laura.
May I start? I would just suggest being curious as you can be. And really approaching the unknown with this sense of wonder and awe and curiosity. And it's a remarkable way to face the unknown rather than assume that it's coming loaded with negative stuff.
I might offer that, though you could probably give me some examples that are not consistent with what I'm going to say next. I think for the most part, the unknowns that we face are sort of semi-known. In other words, we sort of know the general things that could change, right? In general terms, we don't know when, we don't know to what extent. I know there have been some like really left field surprises, but I think that I have this belief that the best thinking that anybody does is when they're not at work and they're just taking a walk or standing in the shower or driving somewhere. And what I would suggest is let these scenarios of what would happen if, and then fill in the blanks with some of those known unknowns. If you know what I mean, like those levers that people could push and pull that would change your life. And I think that in doing that, you will find a way to sort of play out how you might react to give yourself the best chance of not being completely surprised. I know we've been really surprised. I get it. But I think dealing with the unknown is maybe 95% of the time it's not as unknown as we think. And a little bit of just general cogitating can help, you know, clear the cobwebs from your brain and make you feel like you're oriented. So if something like that comes along, you're not starting from zero.
George, if I may add, just something that I share with my fellows and those I've had the privilege to work with. When we find ourselves in a time of extreme stress, sometimes it really helps to simply take a few steps to change our immediate environment. If you can literally get up and you're physically able to, or in some other way, transfer yourself to a different space. If you're near some greenery, step outside of your home, outside of the building, go for a walk, even if it's around the block. If you're in the building, up and down one flight of stairs, whatever you can do, because there's something about the physical movement and the need to look at something else that helps to give you a bit of a break and helps you think about something else. And if you can spend, even if it's a couple of minutes in some natural space, some garden, a tree, whatever it might be, maybe the leaves that you need to clean up on the street, whatever it might be, but something about that change, physical movement and relocation, it makes you focus a little bit differently. And for a moment, it breaks that experience that you're having and gives you a chance to refresh. And I don't mean go out and do it for 3 hours if you can, bless you, but that's not usually practical. So that's why I'm saying even a minute or two can make a difference in helping you reset in the moment. So then you can come back and refresh and apply the fine advice that we have received tonight. Are there more questions?
Yeah, there are. And before we do that, I just want to pause for one moment. Laura, we've got a few questions in the chat for you to just restate what SOAR stands for, if you don't mind repeating that for the group.
Yeah, I'm happy to, and it will be shared with you a whole proper script of the practice and the resources that we share along with other practices. So SOAR, S for slow down, O for open, A for allow, and R for remember.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Did I hear someone else come on mic quickly? Okay. So another question that came through the Q&A function what would you recommend to someone who might be in a safe space themselves in regard to their job security, but maybe feels hopeless to help others, especially in a scenario where in their role they might have to deliver bad news to somebody who may already be in distress? That's a tough one.
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
It is tough. Go ahead, Jane.
No, please, after you.
Well, within the question is the naming that they might be hopeless to help someone else. So the starting point is to recognize that there are limits to what we can do. And while we might want to be more helpful than we can, when we can recognize where those limits are, then we can actually focus on what is possible to do. But sometimes the only thing we can do is to sit with someone and listen to them, or to wish them well in the silence of our heart. And those are important things to do also, even though it's not going to address the challenge that's named.
I would add that I think you will be surprised how connection to another human and compassion and listening and understanding is a value in and of itself, even if you don't have that magic idea that takes away their troubles. I think connecting the people that you would like to help with other people who might be in your community or network is a way to give them more inputs than they might otherwise seek. So again, I think just them knowing that you understand and that you stand for them, you care, is a gift to them.
Yeah.
It is. I think sharing what you learned this evening is a way of helping others that you are leading, that you're counseling, your neighbors, your former employees who are reaching back to you, even within your own family setting, in terms of trying to help others understand what it was transpiring and how you are dealing with it and what advice you may have for them. I love that acronym, that SOAR. I shall quote you and use it frequently. Wish I'd had it sooner because it's spot on. But I think that there's much that has been learned here and shared here. And I am so appreciative of having all of you share in such a way. Thank you. Georgia?
Thank you. I think we have time for maybe one more question, and then we'll share with just a few resources at the end here. So while this is certainly a moment for many that's very challenging, it also is an opportunity for leaders to step up and lead their people. Jane, I heard you say look for heroes, right? I'm curious if any of you have examples that you're willing to share of moments where you were really heartened by leadership in a challenging moment.
Jane?
Well, I'd say that I'm sorry to go back to the pandemic again, but it was such an experience. I mean, I almost feel like, you know, it's really changed my life in some ways, just the experience of going through it. And there were a lot of heroes in that time, most especially the one of the leaders of our agency who had to balance so many different things. And so he's a leader you would expect to take charge, but the way that he did it, the way that he showed up, how open he was, and how many of the stresses he kept in the background so that we could work together. I mean, I always admired him, but he actually became my hero because he never shrunk away. He offered his best thought. He leveraged us and wanted to know what we thought and listened to us. And he maintained this sort of calm and this just the sort of faith that this was all going to work out, that was just, it was catching in a good way. So, you know, I wouldn't necessarily have said hero before, but boy, by the time we were done, he was my hero.
I lived in Houston during Hurricane Katrina, which hit New Orleans, and I witnessed firsthand the county executive planning, executing, saving thousands of Louisianans through his leadership. We saw this in crisis after 9/11. And I just want to name the people on this webinar who are safe, who've taken the time because they care enough to see what they can do. There are heroes. All we have to do is look, because they are everywhere, and we think of heroes in this heroic. Here I mentioned a couple of massive disasters. We've talked about COVID, and we're obviously living in one now, but the heroic emerges right here on this webinar.
I would like to add that each of us, each of you who is attending, who's present, has that in you. There are small acts of kindness and caring and listening and holding hands and perhaps treating somebody to a cup of tea or a cup of coffee or inviting them to just share with you, that will make you the hero to that person, because in that moment of need, you are the one who is there, who is present. You cared enough to attend this evening. I'm sure you will care enough to share what you have learned this evening, and it'll be available online. But I know, and just as I referenced earlier, the fellow who sent out the invitation to his fellow fellows group to share what they might need and what they have to offer to help others. That is such a powerful, concrete step to do, because you are acknowledging what you're experiencing, but saying, despite that, I am here. I still have the capacity to help someone else in some way. And what might seem like an infinitesimal small step for you might mean the world to the other person. Okay, so you are leaders, and you're public servants, and you're in this line of work because it matters and because you can make a difference. So find the small steps you can take to make life a little bit better for any or all or one individual that you can engage with. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Those were all really great questions. Appreciate everybody for entering those. As we wrap up tonight, my colleague Haley already put the link to our Federal Employee Hub in the chat. It has, as she mentioned, the video recordings of these sessions, so you can see this one and any that come in the future. If you're not able to make them live, our explainers are also there. And then there are a ton of links and resources that you might find helpful right now. Additionally, Haley also just put the link that Laura and Evan mentioned. They have very generously shared some resources as a supplemental set of tools, some things that they talked about, as well as a few other things for folks in this specific session. So please reference that and share it as you find helpful to others. And then finally, you know, if you want to enter any other questions, we can always consider those either things that you put into the eval or in this Q&A. If we don't get to them now, it'll help us frame sessions in the future. Just to give you a sense of what's coming up, our next civil service support session will be held on March 13th, another Thursday evening, and we'll be offering coaching to those exiting federal service. So a slightly different group than who we're talking to tonight. So please feel free to share that with any friends or family or colleagues who might benefit. Of course, you can attend if you want, but we're really trying to make sure that we reach the right people with each one of these sessions. Future explainers. So again, those more kind of concrete informational sessions about current issues, information that you might need. March 3rd, we'll have How Can I Protect Myself from Doxing and Other Forms of Harassment. March 5th, we'll have How Can I Maximize My LinkedIn Profile? So maybe folks who are looking for future opportunities. And then March 12th, What Do I Need to Know About DC Unemployment Insurance? All of that information is on our website. I know I'm going through it really quickly, so feel free to reference it. I know it's 7, but as I mentioned before, give that a look. There's FAQs, links, all kinds of things that might be helpful to you. And we just deeply appreciate your service. Thank you. And I'll pass it over to Feli for a good night.
Thank you. Thank you for what you do each and every day. Thank you to our guests, Jane, your invaluable experience from NASA. Laura and Evan, you are now going to be on speed dial and speed look for all of us because you really enriched the conversation and gave us a different way of thinking about what we do. Georgia, it's a pleasure to work with the partnership team. You guys do a phenomenal job. You really are an essential organization. And the care and attitude and concern that each of you brings is, invaluable. So thank you, and the very best to all of you in the audience. Go forth and succeed. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Well.